동료들을 위해서, 받은 은혜에 보답하기 위해서 행동하는 것이 그렇게 한심한 일입니까?
I'm sure you don't need me to say this, but spoilers for the entire game ahead. Also a disclaimer, this video is really opinionated unlike my usual stuff. This is not supposed to be a video based on fact. I talk a lot about the way Philip is portrayed and why he's made to be seen that way, but this doesn't necessarily mean that was how Project Moon intended his character. You might even feel like I'm rambling at points. Also, spoilers for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, and Gurren Lagann. You might want to stop watching now if you're halfway through those, or if you're planning to start watching them. I'm gonna be honest with you, Philip is my second favorite guest in the entire game, only beaten out by Yen. If you feel like this video is a bit biased, that's because, well, it is. His archetype aligns with a lot of popular heroes from other series. Compare him with Simon or Koichi, for example. All of these characters share three specific traits. They first of all start off as cowards, they are often seen as weak-willed, meek and polite, but they all have a large amount of development potential. Koichi himself and his stand are noted to have an extremely high potential, showcased with the different acts. Kamina notices Simon's potential and nurtures it, allowing him to slowly become one of the strongest beings in the universe. Yes, I know, Philip is a grade 5 fixer and doesn't have that much in terms of strength. However, most recognize that he holds a large amount of potential, which is slowly realized and then deconstructed as the game goes on. The art book even says that he's quick on the uptake, learning things much faster than others. In addition, let's be real here, Philip has one of the most broken passives in the game. Passion gain power by double the emotion level up to level 1. For those of you less savvy when it comes to Library of Ruina mechanics, let's compare this to another passive 2 chapters ahead. Remember, this is 2 chapters, this is supposed to be much stronger. Further, offensive dice gain +1 power at emotion level 3 or above. And this is a really decent passive as well. Let's break this down. Philip has a passive that gives him 2 power to every dice he plays after he reaches emotion level 1. The Liu fixers that are supposed to be stronger than Philip gain 1 power to only offensive dice and only after they reach emotion level 3. Pretty ridiculous, right? He's a grade 5 fixer. The only thing that lets the Liu top him in strength is general stats and the extra speed die, but even that is likely more from body modifications rather than just pure ability. Then what went wrong? Those characters I mentioned earlier, they differ from Philip in one major aspect, and no, it isn't their height. It's their circumstances. Where Philip differs is his final fight as a human. Koichi and Simon at some point made the decision to keep fighting, for others and for themselves. After running away time and time again, they finally decide to muster up the courage to fight back against their assailants, and finally manage to defeat them. Through making this decision, they realize their potential somehow through some in-universe mechanic. Philip never makes this choice, or to be more exact, he never followed through with it, and not out of any fault of his own. For those of you that didn't play the game, Philip was a part of the Dawn office with 2 other members, Salvador and Yuna. After entering the library, those 2 died, but he runs away and manages to survive the incident. Up to this point, Philip has characterized himself as someone considerate and noble. He convinces himself that he left Salvador and Yuna out of a sense of responsibility. He would only hold them back if he stayed, so it would be better if he ran to get back up. To be fair, it isn't entirely his cowardice. Philip himself says that Yuna and Salvador told him to run, and both of them do have special lines for when he dies, telling him to run. However, after seeing them turn into books, well, his heart shakes. He seeks out the Wedge office, following Salvador's instructions that were left in case something ever went wrong. And this is when the most important bit of his character development plays out. The fixers at the Wedge office don't give him any support or kind words.
네가 어리숙하고 약해 빠져서 동료들이 다 죽은 거 맞다고.
The first step to Philip's development.
적어도 우리 사무소에서는 절대 자네 같은 해결사를 받지 않을 거야. 물을 흐리거든.
어딜 가도 정에 연연하지 말라느니, 급에 맞지 않는다느니, 어리숙하다느니, 해결사라면, 아니, 도시에 살아가는 사람이라면 누군가를 위해서 행동하면 안 되는 것입니까?
This is the only time in the game that Philip actually raises his voice against another person. I checked. The only other time he starts shouting and screaming is... well, let's leave that for later. And in the end, all that he's shouting for to ask is... why? Why do the people in the city work this way? Is it necessarily a bad thing that he wants to avenge his senior and master for the sake of preserving their memory? and this is the second and at the same time the most vital step to Philip's development.
자네는 자신이 누군가를 위해서 행동한다고 굳게 믿고 있겠지. 삭막하고 이기적인 도시의 사람들과 달리 자신은 이타적으로 행동하고 있다고. 하지만 그것은 철저히 이기적인 생각이야. 이기적인 생각 중에서도 자신을 속이는 가장 위험한 부류지. 이타적인 행동이라는 건 인간에게 있을 수 없어. 누군가를 위해서 목숨을 바치겠다는 것도 자신을 위한 것이야.
전
말은 그럴싸하겠지만 정말 네가 살바도르나 다른 동료들을 위해서 열을 내는가 싶기도 하군.
먼저 준비하고 있도록 하겠습니다.
While he doesn't admit anything, he's internalized the thought. What if I'm actually the asshole? Am I really doing this all for them? Either way, the Wedge office and Philip enter the library before Philip runs away again, leaving the three members of their office to their fate. But something's different this time.
이번에는 끝까지 함께 싸울 수 있을 거라고 생각했는데 나에게도 무언가에 맞설 용기가 있다면 이건 누군가를 위한 일이야. 나는 누군가를 위해서 목숨을 바칠 각오까지 했으니까. 하지만 지금은 때가 아닐 뿐이야. 물론 나는 끝까지 누군가를 위할 것이니 괜찮아. 더럽고 추악한 이기적인 사람, 끝없이 반복하는 그들을 위한, 타인을 위한, 누군가를 위한 나를 위한 이기심을 감추려 포장하고 지정한 말들. 그 말대로 제일 이기적이고 위험한 건 나였어. 더 이상 누군가를 위한다는 말로 꾸미고 싶지 않아. 모든 일은 날 위한 거라고. 그 누구보다 슬퍼하고 있는 나를 위해서.
So my friend did a bit of me. I know this kind of a bit out of the mood currently, but Philip is the complete opposite of Oirgaru's Hachiman. And yes, I'm going to actually use this as an example in this video. Hachiman's character arc focuses on his low self-esteem. He truly believes that if he's the only one hurt and tarnished from a scenario, then that is the best ending possible. He himself doesn't even call it self-sacrifice, as he does not feel the pain that comes from the decisions that he makes. He holds himself to that low of a standard. Philip's character arc focuses on the exact same thing: low self-esteem. While he's shown as a weakling that runs when the situation gets even slightly out of hand, the character himself is actually pretty strong. However, he differs from Hachiman in that he truly believes that he is doing the best he can to serve others. He would even maybe call it self-sacrifice, leaving the Dawn Office behind and taking the burden of avenging them himself. While over time Hachiman develops and promises to stop being so selfish and consider the people around him, Philip consciously chooses to be selfish. After running away twice, he finally chooses to make a decision for himself.
더 이상 누군가를 위한다는 말로 꾸미고 싶지 않아.
He accepts his fatal flaw. He realizes how clouded and blinded he has been, and he stands up facing the enemy alone in order to get his revenge.
슬퍼하고 있는 나를 위해 대신 울어줄 사람은 없어. 결국 이 아픔은 내가 안고 가야 하는 거겠지.
Not for the Wedge Office, not for Salvador, not for Yuna, but for himself.
이 감정을 없애지 못한 채 계속 안고 가야 한다면 차라리 이 슬픔과 함께 일어설 수 있는 길을 택하겠어.
And this self-acceptance finally allows him to manifest his ego.
할 수 있다고 믿으니까, 해야만 하는 일이니까 어떻게든 앞으로 나아가야 해. 이 힘은 분명 나에게 주어진 기회일 테니.
This is the peak of Philip's story. He's developed, he's grown as a person, and genuinely become stronger from it. If Philip was in a non-Project Moon related game, his story would have likely progressed the same way Koichi's did. This is the critical point, where he chooses to stand up for himself rather than giving in to his fear. The viewer gains respect for Philip's character. Some may say that he should have manifested his ego earlier, before everyone around him died, but it's because everyone he cared about passed that he could gather the emotion and strength to fight back. Most people at this point care about Philip to a certain extent. You may despise him for being a pussy, you may dislike him for his self-righteousness, but he threw it all away for this moment. His heroic final stand. You don't care if he wins or loses anymore, even if he lost to the library, lost to you, the villain of the story. He's gained your respect as someone who has confronted the darkest parts of himself and wielded it to beat you. How many of us can truly say that we accept our flaws? How many of us can truly say that we are liars, that we're fake? Not many. Philip is one of those that can, which makes this part feel as baity as this thumbnail my friend made. You see, Oscar put a transporter on him, in case Philip got in over his head and tries to get himself killed. This transporter will at least teleport him out of the library and...
이것은 8시의 사카스.
Now, why Oscar thought this was a good idea, I have no clue. Pamelli literally had to get her body replaced due to the damage sustained there. Maybe he felt like being in a dangerous place would be better than being dead. But, you know, knowing how this goes. This is when Philip's story detracts from the standard cowardly lion archetype, and it's when the Project Moon writers just gut punch him over and over and over again. Just to give you a refresher, the 8 o'clock circus is a distortion and it's ran by a ringmaster, Oswald. And Philip soon realizes something.
네 녀석들 때문에 쐐기 사무소 분들이 우리를 도와주지 못해서 나를 제외한 분들은 전부 도서관에서 죽었어. 만약 너희 같은 잔챙이 녀석들이 없었다면 지금쯤 선배와 스승님은 무사하셨을지도 모르겠네. 이런 우연이 다 있구나.
And this is when he goes off the rails.
이곳에서 널 썰어버리겠어.
Oswald, able to smell the distortion in him, brings up illusions from Philip's heart of Salvador and Yuna, trying to give Philip that final push. And wow, it's just sad. I would call it delusional, but it's literally a delusion, so it wouldn't quite work. Side note, these illusions are based off Philip's perspective of the truth, so the way they talk and the subjects they talk about are not in spite of Philip's opinion, but because of it. For some context, Philip had confessed to Yuna a bit before this. She told him to give her some time to think about it, but never addressed it before she was booked.
필립, 그때 네가 한 말에 대한 답을 못 줘서 미안해.
However, one moment caught Philip's attention when Yuna suggested that they eat at Salvador's place after clearing out the library. Now, for some absolute god-forsaken reason, he instinctively thinks, my master must have NTR'd me.
하지만 스승님께서는 부인과 자식이...
And the Yuna illusion reinforces that, suggesting the idea.
알고 있었어? 내가 너를 멀리하는 이유도 너와 하려던 이야기도?
But the Salvador illusion completely denies it and instead chastises Philip for being, well, delusional.
대답을 망설였단 이유로 우리를 향한 온갖 더러운 망상들이나 해대었지. 안 그런가?
This moment exists to prove both Salvador and Yuna right. They were correct to be worried about how he would handle himself after they both died. His emotions would spiral and would slowly destroy him. After this, he finally forsakes both Salvador and Yuna, crossing a line he would never return from.
다 똑같은 놈들이야. 날 가지고 놀았을 뿐이라고.
And unfortunately, he finally breaks, after the illusory version of Yuna dresses him down.
그야, 있는 그대로의 자신을 받아들이는 것보다 남을 위하는 척을 하는 편이 더 쉽잖아.
그만해.
And then, yesterday's promise shows up, offering to grant him whatever he wants, even when offered a chance to save the two he cared so much about. All he wanted at this point was to not hear, to not see, to not speak. And finally, Philip distorts. You know what's the true tragedy of this story? It's that Philip, he'll never come back, at least as a human. And while there are a multitude of reasons for this, his own cowardice, the ineptitude of the Dawn Office and the Wedge Office, and even the 8 o'clock circus, the most ironic and main reason why he distorted and is now permanently dead is because Oscar cared. Because he wanted to make sure that Philip was safe, He put that transporter on him, inadvertently leading to Philip distorting and never ever coming back. At least as his human self. Makes you wonder where he is now. Imagine finding out that you tried to save someone but instead worsened the situation, turning them into a distortion that rampaged in the nest, killing tens of thousands of people before they finally stayed permanently dead. Well, if you hadn't done anything at all, they would have been completely fine, and none of those people would have ever died. I really hope we see Oscar again. Has he changed? Maybe. Knowing the city, this could just be seen as another unfortunate occurrence. But I don't feel like he's someone who would take it so lightly. After all, because of him, the hero that never was, never will be.